Thank you. I thank you for having me tonight. And as you said, I arrived in the UK very recently, and it's quite an honor for me to take part of this meeting. And we are here to share our views, as you said, on the current situation in Cuba, in particular as a result of the impact of the measures that take part of the economic, commercial, and financial blockade imposed by the United States against Cuba. The blockade in this sense, and this is important to be streamlined, continues to be the central element of the US policy towards Cuba. The effects of this undeclared war, they call it embargo, but it's indeed an undeclared war, on the economy, society, and daily life and dreams of over 11 million persons in Cuba. These effects are, in fact, immeasurable. Biden administration has left untouched the measures adopted during the Trump administration. And in this connection, it's important for us to understand the extent of this policy, that over 80% of the Cuban current population has never experienced something different to the blockade. That means that was born and lives and have been raised under this policy and the harmful effects of this policy. In particular, the impact of such a cruel policy has a remarkable impact in the public health sector. Purchases of the supplies needed by Cuba to sustain the public health, which, as you know, is free for all, have been severely affected by the cancellation of contracts and also the rising marketing cost and growing pressure on the banks worldwide. This is especially difficult because of the implementation of the relisting of Cuba as a so-called state sponsor of terrorism. In recent years, dozens of suppliers around the world have suspended their dealings with Cuba. The results have included unprecedented difficulties for the pharmaceutical industry. Such severe limitations undermine the quality of the public services with a direct impact in the national health indicators. Some of the examples we are in the position to share are that currently 20,000 Cuban families are waiting for diagnosis of genetic diseases. It has not been possible to provide adequate care because the necessary technology uses over 10% of US components. Hence, this technology is forbidden for Cuba because of the blockade. JASCO, a Japanese company that manufactures spare parts for laboratory equipment, has refused to sell Cuba because of its inclusion in the so-called list of state sponsors of terrorism. Several banks have also refused to operate with Cuba because of their listing of our country in such a group. And we all know that it's baseless and it's also undeserved. There are no grounds for the US government to include Cuba in that list. Another example is that 3 Swiss banks refused to transfer donations to Cuba from the solidarity organization Medicuba, Switzerland. And those contributions were intended for the purchase of surgical instrumentation for burns and reconstructive surgery. These are very delicate issues that we are facing as we speak, and that is in addition to the hardships in our daily lives to the shortage of power, electricity, because of the lack of availability of fuel in our country for very basic needs that our population has. In addition to Cuba's efforts, we have received solidarity support from different countries around the world. I have to say that the UK has been a champion in this connection, and for many years, trade unions here in the UK have traditionally played a key role in the fight against the blockade, and also promoting solidarity and sharing with other persons here in the UK the reality of Cuba, for people to understand what we really live, and avoid that those people are carried away by the propaganda, especially from the US newspapers. My predecessors and my team here at the embassy have explained to me the long-standing relationships, in particular with the STUC. And that's why I'm very happy tonight to have this meeting with you all. And also, we are very hopeful with the fact that future generations in STUC will be also involved in these solidarity activities for my country. Fighting against the blockade, understanding the reality of Cuba is a matter of justice. Fighting against the blockade and be side by side with Cuba, as you've been doing for a long time, it's also a matter of decency. That's why we thank you so much, and we are open here and ready to continue working with you. Thank you.
It's a great pleasure to be with you, and I want to really thank Josh and others in the youth sector for holding this meeting. It's absolutely important in this time of the genocidal war that the Israelis are prosecuting against the Palestinian people, that we gather together. And I'm going to make some remarks about that in a little bit, but very much grateful to the young people, young trade unionists, for putting solidarity, particularly international solidarity, at the center. And long may you do so, Josh. International solidarity is what makes a trade union, from a union that fights for the workers in that shop to a union that fights to make the world a place for human beings, which is the purpose, in a sense, of trade unionism. So bravo, bravo to the young trade unionists. I just want to say I'm very grateful to have listened to the ambassador. Next month, Noam Chomsky and I are releasing a book called On Cuba, which is our very brisk account of US imperialism and the attempt to suffocate the Cuban Revolution. I'm looking forward to coming to Scotland to talk about that book. I'll be in London in September. I hope to see the ambassador and hand her a copy of the book in person. It's a defense of the Cuban Revolution, but really it's about the barred teeth of the reactionaries who govern in Washington and have done so for a very long time, with their, shall we call them what they are, their poodles in at number 10 Downing Street, who bark when asked to, and bark ferociously sometimes. They are not so weak as to bark lightly. They are pretty ferocious people down at 10 Downing Street. You know, the world is in such a place, friends, that the political leaders in charge, whether it's Rishi Sunak, Olaf Scholz, Joe Biden, whoever it might be, these political rulers have made choices for us over the generations. You know, right now, global military spending annually is at a minimum $2.5 trillion a year, minimum. You see, anytime you go up to a government, whether it's the Scottish Parliament, or you go to Westminster, or you go anywhere, any government in this world, and say, you know what, we have children starving. There are children starving in in our cities in Scotland, in our small towns. Children are not able to eat. Our schools are crumbling. There's not enough chairs in the schools and so on. They turn around and they say to us, well, we just don't have the funds. We don't have the funds. Well, there's two reasons why they really don't have the funds. One is they basically let the rich off from paying taxes. There's been a global tax strike. We think of strikes as something that workers go on. But listen, the bosses go on strike all the time. They have been on a long-term strike, refusing to pay taxes collectively as a class. As a class, they are on strike. They refuse to pay tax. They have blackmailed their own governments. They're starving their own governments. I mean, the Conservative government in the UK, 14-year government, that's the government of the bosses. It doesn't even pretend to be a government of the people. It's a government of the bosses. And yet the bosses are starving their own government. They're refusing to pay taxes to their own government. Having shrunk the tax base by this tax strike, long-term tax strike, in fact, a 50-year tax strike from the 1970s onward, having shrunk the revenues coming into government, they then put pressure on these very governments who they are not putting in their fair tax, share of tax into. So the bosses are not financing their own governments, and yet they pressure these governments, the bosses' governments, to make choices that are even more anti-people. So not only do they not fund them, but then they force them to make anti-people choices. One of the great anti-people choice is to divert a vast amount of social wealth to the military. I mean, look at the debate taking place in Europe, including the United Kingdom. Members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization lift military spending to 2% of GDP. Some countries eager to go to 3%. Some even talking about a 5% threshold. I mean, the waste of your resources that go into BAE systems, taxpayer subsidized arms companies that go into Lockheed Martin, that go into other Boeing and so on, that manufacture weapons in Scotland. For instance, the F-15 sighting system manufactured in Edinburgh, manufactured in Scotland, weapons to destroy parts of the world. They have made a choice. They would firstly not finance governments, they shrink the revenue base, and secondly, they force them through all kinds of fantasy issues of security. What security? If I'm a worker and my children can't eat properly, my primary security is the food security of my family, not hiring 50 more police officers to patrol the streets. My first security is the food security of my family, not the security of the police or the security of F-16 jets flying over my head going to bomb young children in Gaza. My children can't eat, and the children in Gaza can't eat. That's international solidarity, friends. And they have made a choice. You see, the bosses' governments have made a choice that they would rather spend our resources on security, whether it's manufacturing arms or hiring more police officers, than dealing with our proximate problems. People cannot afford to pay rent or buy houses. They don't have access to credit. But somehow big corporations always get access to credit. These are political choices. This is not the science of economics. You see, they will then bamboozle us. They'll send an economist with graphs and charts to say, you don't understand. There's no money in the coffers. That's because you've let the bosses go on tax strike. Then they say, you don't understand. We need to increase the growth rate. The most effective way of increasing the growth rate is by the military multiplier. Put money into the military, and that is going to have multiplication results in the economy. But so does the multiplier work if you build high-speed rail. I took the train from London to Edinburgh. It's quite a delightful train. But my God, the trains move at a glacial speed. You need high-speed rail in the UK. In Scotland, you need high-speed rail. You know, in between Beijing and Shanghai, the train goes at 300 kilometers an hour, high-speed rail. Look at the rail services in the UK and look at the choices made by the government. They cancel a high-speed train, not even high-speed, sorry, medium-speed train to go to Manchester. And that too, they cancelled it at the Conservative conference. What a place to cancel it. They're cancelling trains, but increasing military spending. These are political choices. No economist with no number of degrees can convince me that that's a good idea. That the military multiplier is more important than dealing primarily with the choices of enabling people to live decent lives, both in Scotland and in Gaza or in Yemen. Scotland was sending so many weapon systems to the Saudis from which those weapons bombed children in Yemen. Where was the outcry? $2.5 trillion. Out of that, 75% of global military spending is spent by the NATO plus countries. 75%. The Chinese spent 10% of global military spending. The Russians about 3.5%. Your media, including the so-called media BBC, says that Russia and China are the great threats to the planet. Combined military spending of these two countries, about 14%. 75% of world military spending is the United States-led NATO plus bloc, includes the United Kingdom. You tell me, friends, who is the greatest military threat to the world? Is it the country that spends 10% of the world military spending and tries to defend its borders? Or is it the United Kingdom, which sends its ships into the South China Sea to harass the Chinese? How many Chinese ships are coming near Fife and coming near the oil rigs, your oil rigs in the North Sea? None. Zero Chinese military vessels in the North Sea. But the Queen Elizabeth military attack group was in the South China Sea. That's a choice. Your political leaders are making choices. You have to change the balance of forces to make different choices. That's the real international solidarity. International solidarity isn't the Scottish trade union movement sending, food to Gaza, although that is a very important part of our immediate solidarity. The real solidarity is to build the movement to change the balance of power in the United Kingdom, to build the movement to change the balance of power. Because solidarity is not about charity. Solidarity is not charity. Solidarity is about political choices. If your government spent less on the military and more on dealing with the actual needs of people in the UK, then your government will not have the means to go out there and bully people and destroy the planet. That choice of allowing your government to export weapons, BAE Systems at the lead, the choice of allowing your government to export weapon systems, build up its military, is a choice of imperialism and war. And the way to undo that in the long term or medium term is to build your power so that different choices are made in the United Kingdom and BAE Systems is put out of business, and instead you have a company with the same skills producing light rail, high-speed light rail, producing better infrastructure for the UK. You see, when people say, oh my God, we can't close down BAE Systems, what about all those jobs? The classic defense by the bosses. That's when the bosses start worrying about workers' jobs. When we say shut down a weapons factory, then they say, what about the jobs? Any other factory, they shut down cruelly and say, we don't care about the workers. But when we make the argument and we say, shut down BAE Systems, don't export weapons to Yemen, the bosses come back and say, oh, we care about the workers. Really? Yesterday you shut down all these other factories, machine tools companies, shut down like this. You didn't even give people a severance. You just showed them the rear door and said, we'll frisk you on the way out because we don't even want you to take out a hammer. And now you're telling me when we say shut down, but we're not even saying shut it down. We're saying convert it. The UK's infrastructure is crumbling. Don't blow up bridges. Build them. Stop blowing up bridges. Learn to build bridges. And I mean build bridges both really, like really repair your bridges. I worry for them, and build bridges to the world. The way to get to know the world isn't to go and destroy it. You know, Rory Stewart wrote a ridiculous book about his time in Afghanistan. You know, how it sounded like an old British imperial officer in Afghanistan, his book. Get to know the Afghans. You don't need to know them from the other side of a machine gun. It's not a great way to build solidarity or humanity. Okay, that's not the way you do it. So, just to try to put everything together, because I can go for hours on this, Josh. You know, this is a deeply personal thing. I feel it in my bones, this whole thing about the choices made by these governments. It angers me. You see, that's why I can speak at length about this. And this is the thing I want to end on, this thing about emotion. It's just horrible what is happening in Gaza. It is beyond horrible. I was so proud of the Irish people, you know, for putting up the Palestinian flag outside the Irish Parliament. My heart, when I saw those photographs and videos, when I saw my friend Declan Kearney of Sinn Féin stand up in the Dáil and give a speech about this, my heart was really feeling amazed. You know, I felt so good. I felt so good. I felt in Red Clydeside, will they put up Palestinian flags? Will the Scottish Parliament, you know, have a thing? Because I am so upset and angry. When the Rafah tent massacre took place, I felt sick. When the flower massacre took place, I've reported wars for years. Iraq, Syria, Libya, and so on. I've been to Gaza twice. Horrendous, horrendous violence visited upon the Palestinians. Horrendous. And this is what I'm trying to wrap up to say. We can't have a bloodless attitude in this fight, comrades, friends. We have to allow our emotions to be part of it. We can't be bloodless. I am angry and I'm upset at the same time. We have to fight triply hard against the terrible, ugly choices governments make. We have to fight triply hard. We have to go amongst people. Each one of us have to become 100. We have to go amongst our memberships. We have to talk about solidarity not as something to do with other people, but to do with us. You see, our needs cannot be met if our governments are out there destroying the world. Our needs cannot be met. You can't fight in a narrow way for rising wages in a factory if your government is importing inflation through reckless wars against the Russians. You can't deal with rising, you can't fight in a factory to have better wages. It's not going to solve your problems. We need more. We have to demand more. We have to be hungry for more, but we also have to allow our emotions there. The world is becoming a sicker and sicker place unless we fight like hell to humanize it. And trade unions are so key because the humanizing of the world cannot happen by ideas alone. They must happen by the mass of people. And trade unions play such a key role in organizing the mass of people. Change the political choices, build power, learn to build bridges and not blow them up. Thanks a lot.